the Strength Beyond Struggle podcast and Ending the Silence program of the National Alliance for Mental Illness, NAMI, sponsored by Access. In every episode, we deal with difficult mental health topics, including suicide. So if you're struggling, remember, you can always get help by calling 988. Hey, welcome. And today I have with me Diego Mejias. He is a 22-year-old psychology student who has spent years untangling the abuse, just a mess of emotions and things that an abusive father caused. And we're going to discuss today how this adverse childhood experiences of abuse and belittling or divorce, there's numerous family traumas that can happen, affected you in particular. And you do have a brother and a sister?
Yes, I have a younger brother who has severe autism, a lot of nonverbal and social stuff he can't understand, and also have a younger sister too.
And your younger sister is as functional as you are and fine.
Yes.
But that, I wanted to dip into that just a second because we've talked about it, because your brother, is he the youngest or the middle or?
He's the middle child.
Middle child. So, and that's a real strain on a relationship.
It's, with his autism, he is definitely like a full-time job because he doesn't know how to use a bathroom by himself or portion his meals or being able to get out of the house or find ways to entertain himself. So my family and I are always like right there with him, taking care of him or just like helping him live his life. Yeah.
24/7.
Mm-hmm.
365 days. That's a lot. And so for your father, you were talking about how it was a divorce. You were about 14 when your parents had irreconcilable differences.
When I was 14, that was when they finally split for good. And when I say for good, because there were attempts on my mom's part to leave him with us, but they were unsuccessful until 2016.
I see. Okay. So that in and of itself is a very stressful situation, mm-hmm. and adds to one of those adverse childhood experiences. And can you help us understand kind of how your dad really made the situation worse?
How he made the separation worse?
Yeah, just your whole life worse. I mean,
well,
how he treated you, how he treated your mother.
Mm-hmm. Well, he was very verbally and emotionally abusive. You just never knew, like, if you walked into a room, whether or not he was going to be nice to you, or if he was just going to find something to criticize. Like, he could find just something wrong and find a way to blame someone for it. Say in my case, he liked criticizing me for my interest in video games, despite the fact, like, even as young as say 9, he was still pretty hard on me, like how much time I spent on them, and just mm-hmm. was never really okay with my hobbies. And then there's with my mom that he always just criticized her parenting, from, like, say in his words, not being able to control my brother, spoiling my sister, and turning her into, in his words, mind you, a brat. Which, mind you, like, this was.
I'm sorry, he called your autistic brother a brat.
He called my younger sister.
Your younger sister a brat.
Yeah, and that was like that was because, like, if say, like, how normally kids, like, say they have like a temper tantrum or just act out normally, or say just simple as not doing something that he wanted, he would blame it on my mom. And that's just, yeah. And then there's specific things that he did with my brother and sister, which I could go on about that.
But the point is that he was a chaos generator in your home, kind of.
Yeah. He just always found something to criticize, even if he just pulled it straight out of his butt in the moment.
It's hard to live with that much criticism. And have you found, so it was around the time of the divorce at 14 that your mother decided, after she finally left, and that's very courageous of her. Mm-hmm. You probably were grateful that she got you out of that situation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a hard one. But so she started, so we were talking about some of the situations where belittling, how it affects your ability to connect with others. Mm-hmm. You were talking about that you withdrew.
Yes. The way that I handled the abuse, or at least what it did to me, is that it made me very anxious and withdrawn from people. I remember when I was in eighth grade that I could not initiate conversations. I was just too afraid or just really didn't care to go out of my way and start talking to people. I would just wait for them to come to me and just talk just say what I needed to say. And I would even sometimes just go days without saying a word because I didn't have to. No one spoke to me, so I didn't have a reason to talk.
And
That
you'd be in school anyway,
yeah,
and nobody would talk to you.
yeah.
So, and that is that because, and we talked about this, kind of living your life always on high alert and in threat mode. So you're feeling like, well, why initiate a conversation if I don't know what's going to come back at me? Is that what it was?
Pretty much, and that's like another effect of like since I didn't have a lot of conversations, I didn't know how to have a conversation. So even when I would get into one, I was very awkward. I didn't know what to talk about or to at least maintain the conversation.
Did that make other kids uncomfortable?
I think so. Like I remember very few people who would even stay and regularly try to come back and talk to me. And even them, I would sometimes wonder like, what they saw in a kid that didn't want to have conversation.
So you judged yourself and said, why would they even want to talk to me?
Oh yeah, I mean, I was definitely self-critical of myself at the time
Because
because,
you kind of absorb the voice of your parent, don't you?
hmm yeah, I tried fighting it a lot, but definitely there were a lot of a lot of negative self-talk that developed from it.
And that, I'm not sure that our audience understands the seriousness of negative self talk and how it
Hmm.
limits your life. Do you have any examples of, besides just you didn't, so you just went to school, you got A's because that was something to do and achieve at, and then you went home and you played games and your father would then just harass you.
Yeah, every so often he would come up with this. He often gave me this lecture about how that I spent so much time playing video games that was going to be my life. I was going to grow up, dig holes for a living, just to go home and play video games. That was a regular lecture that he gave me, and I I learned to just kind of not so much tune that out, but just to not take it seriously. Because there was this one time where he gave me a lecture. It was late at night. I think I was about to go to bed, but he stopped me in the middle of the night, gave me that lecture, and I remember he had his headphones into his smartphone and he was watching something for fun. And I just looked at him and I'm like, so you're criticizing me for the things I like to do. Meanwhile, you have a phone in your hand and you went out of your way to entertain yourself by putting me down instead of just going back to your phone.
And the hypocrisy of that is just kind of like, really?
Yeah. So at least that's when I started, that's when I started realizing that there was something wrong with him and that I
What
really,
you?
yeah.
What?
Yeah, that's when I at least started getting an idea because I still had, I still developed some negative self-talk
Mm.
um
It's a bad
long
habit.
after that. Yeah.
It's just a bad habit. I've had it too. It's
Mhm.
good to get rid of that in your mind. So tell me how did you, I mean, how did you decide? Okay, so that's wonderful. That's like a critical moment where you went, I can do better. I am not that person. Um, what did you do after that to I mean, what were you, how'd you find these goals that you wanted to go, it's hard when you're beating yourself up in your mind and you're not even talking to people, you're not even trying. How did you pull yourself out of that hole?
Mm, like how did I start healing? Is that the question?
Yes, yes.
Well, mind you, the healing journey really didn't start until after the divorce and after my mom separated from my biological father.
Okay.
Because
And
once,
you had the space to do it.
yeah, we had the space to actually heal and start thinking for ourselves. And we started learning that, good relationships involve people who want to build you up and praise you, not people who want to, put you down at whatever point they can.
Or is it kind of almost to control you, to put you down like that?
I mean, in retrospect, yeah, that's most likely why he did it. Or
Like the
what?
time in the bedroom? You want to tell about the bedroom situation?
Um,
That was kind of a
mhm.
controlling thing where,
Oh yes, that one. Well, so what happened? I think it was about 8 years old, and my biological father told me to put down the video games and come back out to, just to hang out with the family. But um, I didn't really want to, but I knew I had to. So I just kind of went into my room and I tried to finish up the game that I played, but it just took longer than I planned to. I started playing for longer, and eventually he just kind of he waltzed in with everyone and just said, "Party in Diego's room because he can't get off his video games." And then we just hung out in the room for the whole day because if I wasn't coming out, he brought the whole family in.
okay. How did that feel to have everyone just barge into your space?
I mean, it was definitely very there was like it felt pretty violating because I already felt pretty protective of my stuff in my room in the first place.
It's a safe space.
Hmm.
And he just came in and said, I own it. I can be here. I can do whatever I want.
Yeah, and I mean, granted, like I mean, I was still kind of like, I guess for lack of better words, defined by staying on the video games where I could have gotten out, but it still didn't feel good to have everyone just kind of walk in.
Well, it's okay. And this is the thing that I find people might think that this story is, well, just shake it off, get over it. But when you have this repeated behavior of disrespect from your parent, not only that, belittling, and belittling is one of the adverse childhood experiences. If you have someone that belittles you at home, it's that important that they call it toxic stress.
Hmm.
That what the ACEs is toxic stress, and that toxic stress elevates, your cortisol and all kinds of things. It's really physiologically and mentally and emotionally really toxic. And so these family behaviors, and why I'm talking to you today, is that you had the courage to face it, and think what a blessing that your mother said, I got to get you out of here. And you're right, give you the breathing room to just say, all right, who am I? What am I doing? How do I build myself up after this person
Hmm.
who's supposed to be protecting me?
Yeah, but instead he just kind of put me down and just didn't really give me a reason to feel good about myself.
That's a very cruel legacy for a parent to leave for a child. And so the courts actually got involved and have protected your family, you and your brother and sister.
Yes. Uh, yeah, after we separated in 2016, went through a very long court process, which finally in 2014, all of my siblings have either put their foot down and said, I don't want to see him, or they're just of that age where, you know, he can't take him back to court. So now it's the court has enforced that, we don't have any reason to be in contact with him. And we've even gotten like a confidential address to kind of help stay off the radar. He can't find us. And they've made sure that, he's not just going to be able to track us down. They
Because he's still harassing you in the courts because you have a 16-year-old sister and he's still trying to get custody or make her
Yeah.
visit or even.
Yes, for that I think that ship has started to sail because she's about to turn 17, and at that point, the court's just gonna probably gonna respect her word a little bit more no matter what. But
Mhm.
that's a long story. But throughout the throughout the years, yes, he has taken my mom back to court over my siblings and I, trying to find some way to gain custody of us. The way that he did it was trying to just make it seem like my mom was a bad guy, that she really wasn't the good that she was the problem, trying to separate us or not let us see.
So the job of the court is to make sure that the children have the best. And so what he was saying is your mom was not the best and he was better.
Yes, that
Mhm.
that she was trying to alienate us from him, and that the only reason that this idea got put out that he was a bad guy was because of my mom. Like that idea
And he
never.
had no responsibility in that at all.
Yes.
And that's an important thing I want the audience to understand. That's called that's a behavior pattern. And you are studying psychology now.
Hmm.
Could you call that narcissism? I don't want to overstate narcissism, but
Well,
narcissism is when you're never wrong.
hmm that is definitely part of narcissism. I mean, I could go into my own talk about like the clinical definition, but from what I've researched, that is a big part of it. That they won't take any responsibility for any wrong ships they've done. It's always someone else's fault because they're just that perfect.
And that's a hard thing for the family to take on, right? That's what you and your mom and your brother and sister took on.
Yes, that's it was never his fault. It was our fault, and even in the court system, he wasn't gonna when he took us back to court, he wasn't gonna let that idea go.
And again, a lot of times people allow that behavior and they say boys will be boys.
I hate that.
Yeah.
But
Thank you for saying that. I hate it too. And and I just want the audience to understand this family behavior, this kind of toxic behavior on the guy's part,
hmm
is really damaging. It really is damaging.
Well, it is, because like with a parent, that's the first person you turn to for support and safety in the world. And in my case, I didn't get that sense of like self-worth or that confidence that I should have gotten from, from my model of what a man was supposed to be. And it definitely took a lot of work to like, not just kind of like separate myself from that, but to undo like that idea of like, I don't have to be this guy. Like I don't have to listen to what he said. I don't have to be that kind of man.
I don't have to choose anger all the time.
Yeah. I don't, I can, I can make mistakes. I can own up to actions and I can still be a good person.
Mm. That's beautiful that you say that. So I want to ask you, did your brother, well, your brother has autism, so of course he would respond differently, but you did have, he did go and stay with your father now and then, and it wasn't good for him.
Yes. So my brother is autism. He's very nonverbal and doesn't understand social norms and cues. So he wouldn't be able to have a conversation like you and I are having right now. He'd be able to say 1 to 2 words to describe what he wants, but that's about it. So you can imagine how difficult it is for anyone, let alone his family and the court system, to figure out, how much is he getting impacted by the abuse.
Right.
But there were very subtle ways if you were able to pay attention. For example, the visitations you brought up. When he was still seeing my biological father, he would see him for 1 weekend every 2 weeks. And during those 2 weeks, when my mom, my sister, and I were looking after him, he was very calm. He was very chill. You could sit next to him on the couch and, he'd want to hug you. He'd want to, it was a joy to be in the same room with him. Fast forward to say after a weekend, just 2 days, 1 afternoon visit. And he would get aggressive. Typically the night right after he would hit someone, he would get very rebellious and just wouldn't listen to anyone. And he just, yes, he was very.
You're spending a couple of days with your dad.
Yes.
That's how toxic your dad was for your autistic brother. How about your sister? How did she respond to all this? And she was pretty young when the divorce happened.
She was probably about 9 when it happened. And mind you, even during that time, she was very confident and sure of herself. Like
a different person from you and your brother.
Very much. Like where I was a bit more kind, reserved, maybe even started taking a little bit more, she wasn't going to have it. Like
she's rebellious, outspoken.
She was very confident and assertive of herself. Like, hey, I'm not going to accept those words. I don't want to see you. And that's that. But yes, even when she was just entering the double digits.
Are you kind of proud of her?
I am very much proud of her.
Yeah.
Because that's something that I probably wouldn't have accomplished at that age.
Well, but you were the first and you were the icebreaker. So, the first one always has it hard.
Yeah. But my sister, like, she still definitely like she was still impacted by the abuse. That's what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely.
One of those, like, she still got some emotional and verbal abuse with how she interacted with my brother. And what I mean by that is when we still lived under the same roof, all of us, my brother was, he was a lot more aggressive. He would hit people more often, almost like probably on a bi-daily basis every other day. And what got so confusing about it was that he could hit you when he was angry, when he was happy. We didn't really understand his aggressiveness at the time. We just knew that it was unpredictable. So you can imagine for, say, young kids, I think she started developing these behaviors I'm about to talk about probably at 7 years old. Let's say that. She would start cringing. Her body would tense. She would she would just develop so much bodily tension, just like being in the same room with our brother, because we just didn't know when he was.
So she was kind of anticipating the punch.
Anticipating, yes, and
terrible for them, actually.
And yes,
that kind of response.
And being the loving, supportive father that he was, he would criticize my sister for feeling the way she did with my brother. Like, shame on you for being upset with your brother for just being in the same room.
Even though my brother's going to punch me and physically hurt me, you're not protecting me, Dad.
Yeah.
You're putting me down. And these little, like I said, these subtle family patterns of behavior. And the sad thing is that your dad, the way he reacted is probably in response to his parents, isn't it?
It probably was. I mean,
well, you're learning that in your classes now, aren't you? You're taking psychology classes.
Yes, that there's multiple reasons for how, like, say, an abusive narcissist turned out the way they were. And, excuse me, if it was because of his dad, I never got to see that because my grandpa died when I was 1.
Okay.
So I never really got to hear much about him.
Mm.
But even when he did talk about it, I just kind of tuned it out because I didn't respect my biological father enough to care about where he came from. So,
Mm-hmm.
you
I
know,
can understand that.
mm-hmm.
But now that you're studying this as a psychologist and family patterns are a thing,
Mm-hmm.
it's just and what I'm trying to tell the audience is that they're not broken, right?
No. Um, yes, despite everything that like we went through, I wouldn't describe us as like being broken because it wasn't like we just found this magical cure or we found this tool at Home Depot that was just going to fix us. Um,
Yeah.
it was what our responses from like my sister cringing around my brother to me socially withdrawing. That was how we learned to just get through the day.
Cope.
Yes, it wasn't that we were broken. It's just what we learned to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why when I, want to be a therapist at the end of my psychological studies, that it's one thing that I'd like to emphasize with anyone who's been through any sort of pain, let alone like emotional and physical abuse, that it's not that they're broken. It's how they've learned to process the trauma. Um, my last therapist put it this way, that it's not what's wrong with you, it's what's happened to you. And
That's beautiful. I mean, isn't that kind of liberating? It makes you feel free.
yeah, like you're not a victim. Like you can decide, you know, like this is what's happened to you. This is what you've learned to cope with the trauma. And now that you're out of it, you can learn a new way.
It's not easy to learn that, is it?
It's not. It was, even in my case, like I started, I think when I was 14, and I'm still on that healing journey to like work on my social anxiety, on my withdrawing, and I'm still working on it. It's been a long couple years.
How are those negative voices? Have they turned around a little bit?
They are, I would say, a lot less effective. They definitely pop up a lot more.
Less effective. I love when you say that.
Yes, like I'm definitely they still pop up every so often, but I'm much better at refuting those very self-critical comments. Like if I did something wrong, I'm able to just kind of step back and just take it for what it is. Like it's a comment about something I did, and I'm not able to say generalize it to my whole life and say that I'm wrong. I'm able to say, okay, I did something wrong. I can do better the next time.
So, we're also here today because you're an Ending the Silence youth presenter.
Mm-hmm.
And was that part of your healing journey to come out and actually tell your story?
I'd say it was, yes. I started these ETS presentations a year ago, and I mean, what it involved was telling my mental health story in front of a group of like at least 30 kids who I didn't know, let alone if they cared about my story.
Mm-hmm.
But what I wanted to do was to be able to share my story with people who were, probably struggling with similar things, and to let them know that, there is hope, there is a way out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And going back to my old high school, which is where I did my first presentation, it was very scary at first, but it was very
Liberating.
rewarding afterward, because I went into a place that I also didn't enjoy. There was some, trauma from there too, but I was able to go back after I was more healed and stuff. And I was able, to just tell my story and to go in and talk in front of a group of people that, say 5 years ago, well, from what I've seen, they seemed very receptive to it. I at least noticed that a lot of people were looking at me during the time.
Mm-hmm.
And
I mean, they weren't going to sleep like when I presented, because I have an adult presentation part of it, and the kids were going to sleep when I talked.
mm-hmm.
So good. I'm glad that, and they do with all the youth presenters. I've heard them just riveted. They love your stories.
Yes. And I remember there was this one case where a student stayed afterward because like they were so moved by my story that they cried and just like needed to talk afterward, because they just resonated so much that it brought up their own, like it brought up stuff from their past. And and even afterward, I got to talk with them, get to know them a little bit. And it was very rewarding to know that, my story touched someone, and I got to connect with someone through it.
It's healing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of why we're doing what we're doing today with this podcast, is telling stories like yours. And Diego, thank you so much for coming here today and talking about this, because to talk about family patterns can be really scary, especially when you're so close with your family. And it sounds like you guys are still very much helping each other out. You're still helping with your brother.
Mhm.
because your mom's a caregiver 24/7.
Yes,
You are a sweet man to do that. Thank you.
definitely. I mean, I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to be here, and I appreciate you guys like letting me come here.
Yes, and we look forward to having you get into this business because we need people like you. There's a lot of people that need to talk to a lot of wise people, and so thank you.
Thank you.
Diego talked about the impact problems in his family had on his mental health. Well, it turns out that we're just starting to understand the profound impact of childhood traumas on mental health. Psychiatrists and researchers use the term adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, to define this phenomenon. This includes a heartbreaking list of experiences. For instance, the most common list of ACEs include family violence, emotional abuse or neglect, physical neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse, family divorce or separation, parental mental illness or substance abuse, being bullied or belittled at home, and sometimes family poverty. The list of traumas differs from one study to the next. The studies show ACEs have a huge impact on well-being. They increase the risk of depression, anxiety, and PTSD. ACEs also increase the risk of schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and obsessive-compulsive disorders. Not only that, people with a high trauma score have more severe symptoms and a harder time recovering. But it's not just mental illness. They face a higher risk of other conditions, including heart disease and obesity. They're much more likely to abuse drugs and alcohol. Kids with 2 or more ACEs generally get lower grades, act out, and are more likely to drop out of school. In general, they just struggle to get along in society. No wonder. It's difficult to live with a painful past rattling around in your head. But there's hope. It doesn't mean you're doomed. As Diego demonstrated, you can get over all kinds of trauma. We just need to use those ACEs as a screening tool. Then we can get people the help they need. Here in Arizona, the state does an annual health assessment based on surveys in every county. They ask how many ACEs people have. In the 2021 survey, 52% said they didn't even have any ACEs. That's hopeful. However, 18% said they had 1 ACE, 12% said they had 2, 6 said 3, 8% said 4, and 5% had suffered 5 of these traumas. One Arizona study that almost 1 in 3 Arizona teens have suffered 2 or more of these traumas. It would take an awfully strong person to not struggle with that many ACEs. You can see some of the fascinating studies we found in our research notes on our website, strengthbeyondstruggle.org. So there's one major study published by the journal JAMA Psychiatry that tried to tease out the impact of genetics and childhood trauma. They studied 25,000 twins from Sweden. Some were identical twins, which means they had the same DNA. Some were what's called fraternal twins, which means they were born at the same time but have different mix of DNA. The study covered a 40-year period. The researchers asked, do ACEs cause mental illness? And what role does genetics play? They found trauma played a key role. 40% had at least 1 ACE. An alarming 8% had 3 or more. ACEs increased the risk of depression, anxiety, and drug use. Each ACE increased the risk by 52%. Genetics really affected drug and alcohol addiction, but sexual abuse had the biggest impact overall. Genetics played a role, but not the dominant role. The more ACEs, the higher the risk. The researchers concluded ACEs can identify risk so we can spot problems early. So let's start by ending the silence about mental illness. And that's what we're doing right now with your help.
It's okay to just be me. We're all made to be unique. It's okay to have my needs. It's okay to be me. What's easy for others are struggles for me. I do things differently. doesn't make me broken, it just makes me me. People out there help me through, ones who care about me and you. Through my struggles I find my strength, feels so good to be me. What's easy for others are struggles for me. I do things differently, doesn't make me broken, it just makes me me. People helping me to get through have their own struggles too. Even though they have their strength, they are human like me. Through these struggles we build our strength. We all want to feel healthy. Even though we make mistakes, struggles build our strength.